Get away from there. Now.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning? It's ruined the second I saw your face.
The janitor's grip tightened on the handle. He swallowed hard.
I'll finish and go.
Go now. You make this place look cheap. Dirty.
The old man's shoulders sank a little.
I clean it every day, sir.
And it still reeks of you. Get out! Take your cart and crawl out!
Something flickered in the old man's eyes. Hurt. Deep and quiet. But he just nodded and reached for his cart. A dozen people saw the manager throw out the old black janitor. Nobody moved. 20 minutes later, that same manager would be on his knees, sobbing, begging that janitor for forgiveness. The truth is, that morning didn't start with cruelty. It started the way every morning started for the old man, long before the suits arrived. His name was Jeremiah Coleman, and at 6:40 in the morning, the Meridian Dynamics Tower belonged to him alone. The lobby was still dark when he pushed through the side door. His cartwheel let out its familiar squeak against the marble. He knew that sound better than his own heartbeat. 40 years of it. He flipped on the low lights. The big glass walls glowed a soft gray, catching the first light over downtown Atlanta. Outside, the city was still yawning. In here, it was quiet enough to hear the building breathe. Jeremiah moved slow, but he never wasted a step. He watered the tall plants by the elevators, checking each leaf with his thumb. He tightened a loose handrail nobody had reported. He wiped down the front desk until it shone. This wasn't just a job to him. You could see it in the way he touched things. Gentle, careful, like the whole place was something he'd raised. The radiators ticked as they warmed. A mop bucket sloshed somewhere down the hall. The night shift cleaners drifted out as he came in. He knew every one of them. "How's that little girl of yours, Rosa? She walk yet?" Rosa laughed, tired but warm. "2 steps yesterday, Mr. Coleman." Then she sat right down. "That's how it starts," he said, smiling. "1 step, then the world." He pulled a granola bar from his coat and pressed it into the hand of a young intern hovering near the coffee station, half asleep. "Long night?" he asked. "First week," the kid mumbled, grateful. "You'll make it. Eat something." That was Jeremiah. The people who knew him loved him. He remembered birthdays. He remembered recitals. He remembered the names of children he'd never met. But here's the thing. Most of the people in that building didn't know him at all. To them, he was just the old man with the cart, furniture, background. He stopped, like he did every morning, in front of the granite wall near the entrance. Carved into the stone were 3 words and a year. Meridian Dynamics, founded 1988. He looked at it a long moment. Something soft crossed his face. Then he moved on. Clipped inside his cart, behind the spray bottles, was a small laminated badge. The edges were worn smooth from years of his thumb. The photo on it was a much younger man. The number under the name read 001. He never showed it to anyone. He didn't need to. By 7:30, the building started to change. The quiet broke. The elevators began to hum. Heels clicked across the marble. Phones buzzed. The smell of fresh coffee and cologne filled the air. Sharp suits poured in, talking fast, all of them trying to look more important than the person beside them. Today was a big day, and everyone felt it. The board's anniversary. A delegation of major investors was coming to tour the building and meet the founder, a man almost none of them had ever seen in person. So the pressure was high. People wanted to shine, and no one wanted to shine more than Derek Anderson. You could spot him a mile away. New manager, newly promoted, walking like the floor owed him rent. He straightened a painting that was already straight. He snapped at a barista over the foam on his coffee. To Derek, the lobby wasn't a workplace. It was a stage. And he had decided, somewhere deep down, that he was the star of it. He checked his reflection in the glass, smoothing his tie twice. He rehearsed a handshake under his breath, lips moving. His eyes scanned the room, looking for anything that might make him look bad in front of the men he was so desperate to impress. And that's when his eyes landed on the old man with the mop. Jeremiah hadn't done anything. He was just doing his work, near the front doors, the way he had for 40 years. But to Derek, he was a problem. A stain on the picture. Something cheap in a room he wanted to look expensive. You could almost see the cruel thought form behind his eyes. The lobby was calm. The light was soft. The day hadn't broken yet. It was the last quiet moment before everything went wrong. Derek crossed the lobby like he owned it. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" Jeremiah looked up from his cart. He'd heard that tone 1,000 times in his life. He set down his cloth and stood straight. "Yes, sir?" "Badge. Now." Derek snapped his fingers. "Let me see your badge." "It's right here, sir." Jeremiah reached into his cart and lifted the small laminated card. The worn one. The one that said 001. Derek barely glanced at it. He laughed through his nose. "What is this? This is garbage. This isn't a real badge." "It's the one I've always had, sir." "Then it's expired. Or fake." Derek flicked it with one finger, and it fell back into the cart. "You expect me to believe security gave you that?" A few people slowed near the elevators, not to help, just to watch. Jeremiah felt their eyes. He kept his voice low and even. "I've worked here a long time, sir. Longer than most." "I don't care if you've worked here since dirt." Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice to something colder. "You're standing by my front doors, looking like that, on the most important morning of the year." "I'll move to the side." "You'll do what I tell you to do." The lobby was warming now. Sunlight slid across the marble in a long, bright stripe. It lit up Derek's polished shoes and the dull gray of Jeremiah's work boots, side by side. A small crowd had formed without anyone meaning to. Phones lowered. Conversations paused. Derek noticed the audience, and something in him liked it. "You know what your problem is?" he said, louder now. "People like you think showing up makes you belong here. It doesn't. You mop floors. That's the ceiling. That's all you'll ever be." Jeremiah didn't answer. He just held the man's gaze, calm and steady, like a deep river that doesn't rise no matter how hard the rain comes down. That calm only made Derek angrier. Then his radio crackled. A voice came through, sharp and tinny. "Derek, you copy? We got a missing demo unit from the 3rd floor. The new tablet prototype. Can't find it anywhere." And just like that, Derek's eyes lit up. Not with worry, with opportunity. He turned back to Jeremiah slowly, a thin smile spreading across his face. "A missing unit," he said. "Now, isn't that interesting?" Jeremiah's chest tightened. He saw exactly where this was going. "I don't know anything about that, sir." "Of course you don't." Derek took a step closer. "Funny how things go missing when people like you are wandering around the building before anyone's watching." The words hit the crowd like a slap. A few people shifted. One woman covered her mouth. Jeremiah's jaw flexed, just once. He had cleaned every inch of that building for 40 years. He had returned wallets, watches, laptops, wedding rings. He had never taken so much as a paperclip, and now this man was calling him a thief in front of everyone. "I've never stolen anything in my life," Jeremiah said. His voice didn't shake, but it dropped, low and serious. "Not once." "That's what they all say." Derek folded his arms. "Empty your pockets." The lobby went silent. Even the hum of the elevators seemed to fade. "Sir." "Empty them, now, or I call the police and let them do it." For a moment, Jeremiah didn't move. Inside, something old and tired ached. He had a choice, right there. He could end this with a single sentence. He could say a name, make a call, and watch this man's whole world flip. But he didn't. He wanted to see it, all of it. He wanted to know exactly how rotten things had gotten in the house he built. So he reached into his coat pockets, slow and deliberate, and turned them out. A folded handkerchief, a few coins, a photograph, soft and creased with age. The granola bars he handed out to tired kids on the night shift. Nothing else. Nothing close to a tablet. The crowd sawed. The shame should have landed on Derek. It didn't. "Check the cart," Derek ordered. A young security guard named Ray had drifted to the edge of the crowd. He froze when Derek pointed at him. "You heard me. Search it." Ray looked at Jeremiah. He looked at the old man's calm, tired face. Something in his gut told him this was wrong. "Sir, I didn't ask you to think." Derek's voice cut clean across the lobby. "Search the cart, or you're standing in the unemployment line right next to him." Ray swallowed. Slowly, he stepped forward. Jeremiah said nothing. He just gave the young man a small nod. It said, "Go ahead, son. It's all right. You're not the one who should feel ashamed." Ray lifted the spray bottles. He moved the rags. He checked under the trash liner with hands that didn't want to do it. There was nothing there. There was never going to be anything there. "Clear, sir," Ray said quietly, almost relieved. But Derek wasn't relieved. Being wrong in front of an audience only made him crueler. He needed a winner and a loser, and he had already decided who was who. "You moved it," Derek said, jabbing a finger at Jeremiah. "You stashed it somewhere before I got here. I know your type." "My type?" Jeremiah repeated, soft. "You know what I see when I look at you?" Derek went on, circling now, playing to the crowd. "Trouble. I saw it the second you walked in." "You don't know me, sir," Jeremiah said. "I don't need to. I know enough." Derek leaned in close, dropping his voice so only the front row caught it. "People like you are all the same." "Yeah, your type." The two words sat in the air, ugly and bare. Everyone heard what he really meant. Nobody said it out loud. Jeremiah's eyes glistened, just for a second, not from fear, from something deeper. The plain, old exhaustion of being judged on sight, again, after a whole lifetime of it. Then he blinked it away. "If you've finished searching me," he said quietly, "I'd like to go back to my work." But Derek wasn't going to let him have that. Not the last word. Not his dignity. Not in front of all these people. "Your work?" Derek laughed, sharp and mean. "You don't have work here anymore. You're done. You're fired, as of right now." A murmur ran through the crowd. He had no power to fire anyone. Not really. He was a new manager who'd been there 5 minutes. But he said it loud, and he said it with a suit on, and so the room believed him. "Pack your cart," Derek said. "Take your little fake badge and your sad little photo, and get out of my lobby before I have you dragged out." Jeremiah stood very still. The sun was full in the windows now. It lit the whole room gold. It caught the wet shine in the old man's eyes and the cruel curl of the young man's mouth. 40 years. 40 years of dawns in this building, of fixing what others broke, of learning the name of every soul who passed through these doors. And it ended like this, with a stranger calling him a thief and throwing him out like trash. Jeremiah reached down. He picked up the creased photograph from the desk where he'd emptied his pockets. He slid it carefully back into his coat, over his heart. Then he gripped the handle of his cart. "Yes, sir," he said. "I understand." That was all. No anger, no shouting, just 2 quiet words and a nod. And somehow, that was the part that made your chest hurt the most. He turned the cart toward the door. The wheel let out its old familiar squeak. The crowd parted to let him through, eyes down, suddenly very interested in their phones. Not one of them said a word in his defense. Not one. Derek watched him go, chin high, proud of himself. He smoothed his tie and turned back toward the elevators, already rehearsing how he'd tell the story to the investors, how he'd handled a problem, how he'd kept the lobby clean. He had no idea. He had no idea that the glass doors at the far end of the lobby were already opening, that the delegation was already arriving, that the woman walking in at the front of the group was about to look across the room, see the old man with the cart, and go pale. He had no idea what he had just done. Jeremiah had almost reached the doors when Derek's voice stopped him. "Hold on. Where do you think you're going?" Jeremiah turned, slow. "You told me to leave, sir." "I didn't say you could leave with company property." Derek strode toward him, heels clapping the marble. "A tablet went missing, and you think I'm letting you walk out of here with that coat? There's nothing of yours in my coat. We'll see." The crowd, which had started to drift away, drifted back. There's a certain kind of person who can't look away from cruelty. The lobby filled again with quiet, hungry eyes. Derek pointed at the cart. "Dump it, all of it, right here." "Sir, I already—" "Now." Jeremiah's hands closed slowly around the handle. For one long breath, he didn't move. Then, gently, he began to set his things on the floor. But Derek had no patience for gentle. He grabbed the side of the cart and yanked. It tipped. Spray bottles clattered across the marble. Rags spilled out. A box of trash liners burst open and slid in every direction. The squeak of the wheel ended in a hard, ugly crack against the stone. The whole lobby flinched at the sound. Jeremiah didn't shout. He knelt down, calm, and began to gather his things back together with careful hands. And that's when Derek saw the photograph fall. It had slipped from the old man's coat when he bent down. It landed face up on the marble, an old, creased black and white picture. Derek snatched it up before Jeremiah could reach it. "What's this?" He held it high, out of reach, like a bully with a smaller kid's hat. "Aw, look at this. A little memory?" "Please," Jeremiah said. And for the first time, there was something raw in his voice. "Please give that back." That single word, "please," should have stopped any decent person cold. It only made Derek smile wider. He looked at the photo. A young black man in work clothes stood in front of a small, half-built warehouse. Behind him was a hand-painted sign, the letters just visible. The young man was beaming, proud, his whole life ahead of him. Derek snorted. "Who's this supposed to be? You? Back when you thought you'd amount to something?" The crowd shifted. A couple of people winced. "That's a long time ago," Jeremiah said quietly, his hands still open, still waiting. "Sure looks like it." Derek flicked the photo with his finger. "Let me guess. This is the part where you tell me you used to be somebody. They all have a story like that." He laughed. "Newsflash, old man. You weren't somebody then, and you're nobody now." Something passed over Jeremiah's face. Not anger, something heavier. He lowered his hand. A few feet away, a young analyst named Hannah Wilson had stopped at the elevator bank. She'd seen the whole thing. Her hand was trembling, and her phone was already up, screen glowing, quietly recording. She didn't know what she was filming yet. She only knew it was wrong, and that wrong things should be remembered. Derek wasn't finished. He tossed the photo onto the pile of spilled rags like it was garbage. "Now the locker," he said. "Ray, get his locker open. Custodial closet. I want it emptied." Ray's face went tight. "Sir, that's his personal—" "I gave you an order." Derek turned on him, eyes flashing. "You want to keep that little badge of yours? Then move." Ray looked at Jeremiah one more time. The old man gave the smallest shake of his head. Not at Ray, but at the whole situation. A look that said, "Don't lose your job over me, son." But this time, Ray didn't move. He just stood there, jaw tight, and said, "No, sir, I won't do that. Not without cause. Not without a supervisor." The lobby went very quiet. Derek's face turned a deep, blotchy red. He'd been refused. In public. By a security guard. In front of the most important people in the company. So he did what cornered, cruel men always do. He got louder. "Fine," he barked. "Then we do this the real way." He pulled out his phone and held it up so everyone could see. His thumb stabbed at the screen. "You know what? I'm calling the police. Right now. We've got a theft, and we've got a suspect who won't cooperate." He stared straight at Jeremiah. "Let them sort you out. Let's see how that fake badge holds up downtown." A gasp went through the crowd. This had gone somewhere real. Somewhere with handcuffs in it. Derek stepped in close now, close enough that Jeremiah could smell the coffee on his breath. He lowered his voice to a hiss just for the old man. "I'm going to enjoy this," he said. "You walked in here like you owned the place, and now you're going to walk out in cuffs, in front of all of them." Jeremiah didn't step back. He didn't look away. He just met the younger man's eyes, steady as stone. "You can say what you like to me," Jeremiah said softly. "I've heard worse, from worse men than you." That got under Derek's skin. He wanted fear. He wanted begging. He wanted to see this man break, and he was getting none of it. So he reached out and shoved the old man's shoulder. Not hard, just enough. Just to prove he could. "Don't you look at me like that," he snapped. Jeremiah rocked back half a step, caught himself, and straightened. A low murmur ran through the crowd. A line had been crossed, and everyone felt it. You don't put your hands on a man for cleaning a floor. Near the elevators, Hannah's thumb pressed record, harder, as if she could press the truth into the phone itself. Her eyes were wet. "Somebody do something," she whispered. But her own feet wouldn't move either, and she hated herself for it. Jeremiah stood very still. The morning sun was hot on the back of his neck now. He could feel his own heartbeat in his ears. He thought about all the times in his long life he'd stood exactly here, judged before he opened his mouth, searched for crimes he didn't commit, told to prove he belonged in rooms he had every right to stand in. He thought about the young man in that photo, the one who'd built something from nothing, with 2 hands and a dream, in a country that kept telling him no. And he felt that old, bone-deep tiredness rise up in him again. But he also felt something else, something steadier. Because he knew what these people didn't. He knew how this story ended. "You should make that call carefully, sir," Jeremiah said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "You're going to want to be very sure about what you say next." Derek laughed in his face. "Are you threatening me?" "No, sir. I'm warning you." "Warning me?" Derek shook his head, delighted. He turned to the crowd, arms wide, performing. "You hear this? The janitor's warning me." He raised his phone higher, recording now, smug. "Go on then. Say it again for the camera. Tell everyone how important you are." And here's the thing about a man like Derek. He was so busy filming, so busy performing, so drunk on his own little moment of power, that he never once looked over his shoulder. He never saw the group of people who had come in through the glass doors. He never saw the receptionist hurry to greet them, then falter, her smile freezing as she caught sight of the scene in the middle of the lobby. He never saw the well-dressed men and women slow their steps, one by one, their faces turning from polite curiosity to confusion to something close to horror. And most of all, he never saw the woman at the front of the group, tall, sharp suit, a leather folder in her hand, the chief executive of the entire company. She had stopped dead in the middle of the marble floor. She was staring across the lobby, not at Derek, not at the crowd, at the old man kneeling on the ground, gathering spilled rags, with a photograph thrown in the dirt beside him. The color drained from her face. Her folder slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a flat, echoing slap. And in a voice loud enough for the whole frozen room to hear, she said one word. A name. "Jeremiah?" The lobby went dead silent. Derek's smug grin began to falter. He lowered his phone an inch. Something cold crawled up the back of his neck. He didn't understand it yet, but his body knew, before his mind did, that something had gone very, very wrong. He turned around, slowly, and there was the CEO of Meridian Dynamics, the woman he'd spent all week preparing to impress, walking straight past him as if he didn't exist, walking toward the janitor. The CEO crossed the lobby fast, heels striking the marble like a clock counting down. Her name was Catherine Davis. She ran the largest company in the building, and right now, she wasn't looking at any investor. She was looking at the old man on the floor. She dropped to one knee beside him, right there in her $1,000 suit, and reached for his hands. "Mr. Coleman, oh my God, what happened? Are you all right?" The whole room stopped breathing. Derek let out a nervous laugh. He couldn't help it. The sound just fell out of him. Ma'am, you don't... That's just the janitor, he said. There's been a theft. I'm handling it. You don't have to get down there with... Catherine stood up, slowly. And when she turned to face Derek, her eyes were so cold the whole lobby felt it. Say that again, she said quietly. Say, just the janitor to me one more time. Derek's smile flickered. Ma'am, I was only... Do you have any idea who this man is? He's a custodian. His badge is fake. He was... His badge, Catherine said, says 001. She let that number hang in the air. Do you know why it says 001, Derek? Because he was the first. The very first. Before there was a building, before there was a company, before there was a single one of us. Derek's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Catherine pointed at the granite wall by the entrance. At the 3 words carved into the stone. Meridian Dynamics, founded 1988. That name on the wall, she said. That's not a coincidence. He didn't just work here. Her voice rose, ringing across the silent marble. He built here. He founded this company, with his own 2 hands, out of a rented warehouse, almost 40 years ago. A wave of shock rolled through the crowd. People who had stood and watched, who had said nothing, now stared at the old man with a horror that had nowhere to go. This is Jeremiah Coleman, Catherine said. Founder, chairman of the board. He owns the controlling share of everything you see. He owns the floor you're standing on, the chair at your desk, the paycheck with your name on it. She turned, slowly, and looked Derek dead in the eye. He signs your salary, Derek. He is the reason you have a job at all. The phone in Derek's hand began to shake. Across the lobby, you could see it land on every face, one by one. The receptionist's hands flew to her mouth. Hannah Wilson lowered her phone, tears running freely now, but still recording, because some part of her knew the world needed to see this. Ray, the young guard, let out a long, shaky breath, like a man who'd just stepped back from a cliff edge. And Derek? Derek looked like the floor had opened beneath him. He looked at the old man he'd shoved. The man he'd called nothing. The man he'd called a thief, a stain, filth that cleans filth. The man whose photograph he'd thrown in the dirt. The young man in that photo, beaming in front of a half-built warehouse, was the same man standing in front of him now. No, Derek whispered. No, there's been a mistake. He never said... He shouldn't have to, Catherine snapped. That's the whole point. He shouldn't have to be the founder for you to treat him like a human being. Behind Catherine, the delegation had gone silent too. These were the investors Derek had spent all week dreaming about. The people he'd humiliated an old man to impress. And now they were staring at him like he was something scraped off a shoe. One of them, a silver-haired woman near the front, spoke up, her voice flat with disgust. We came here this morning to honor this man, to celebrate 40 years of what he built. She looked Derek up and down. And we walked in to find one of his own managers treating him like a criminal. I didn't know, Derek said. The words came out small and useless. I swear I didn't know who he was. That's the part that should scare you, she said. You didn't know, so you thought you could do it. Jeremiah finally rose to his feet. He didn't tower over Derek. He didn't shout. He didn't gloat. He simply stood, calm and whole, and gathered every eye in that lobby just by being still. He bent, picked up his creased photograph from the floor, and brushed the dust off it with his thumb. Gentle, careful, the way he touched everything. Then he looked at Derek, and for a long, terrible moment, he didn't say anything at all. He just looked at him, the way you look at someone who has shown you exactly who they are. You wanted to see my badge, Jeremiah said softly. You held it in your hand. You called it garbage. He held the worn little card up between 2 fingers. It was real the whole time. The silence in that lobby was the loudest thing in the world, and in the middle of it, the man in the sharp suit, the one who'd walked in that morning like he owned the place, felt his knees start to give. Derek's knees hit the marble. He didn't choose to kneel. His legs just stopped holding him. He went down hard, right there in the middle of the lobby, in front of the investors, the staff, the crowd he'd been performing for all morning. And then the tears came. "Mr. Coleman, sir, please." His voice cracked and broke. "I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know who you were. Please, I'm so sorry. Please don't. I have a family. I have bills. Please don't take my job." It was an ugly thing to watch. The same man who'd shoved an old janitor minutes ago was now sobbing on the floor, clutching at nothing. Jeremiah looked down at him, and here's what made the whole room ache. There was no triumph on his face, no payback, just a deep, quiet sadness. "Stand up," Jeremiah said gently. Derek shook his head, gulping air. "Please, sir, I said stand up. A grown man shouldn't beg on the floor. Not even you." Slowly, shaking, Derek got to his feet. He couldn't meet the old man's eyes. "You keep saying you're sorry," Jeremiah said, "but you're not sorry you did it. You're sorry it was me." The words landed like a stone in still water. "If I'd been just a janitor," Jeremiah went on, "if my badge had said anything but 001, you'd have called those police. You'd have watched them put cuffs on me, and you'd have gone to your meeting and never thought about it again. Wouldn't you?" Derek's mouth trembled. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everyone already knew. "That's what you need to sit with," Jeremiah said. "Not who I turned out to be, but who you were willing to do that to, when you thought no one important was watching." Catherine stepped forward, her voice sharp and final. "Derek, your badge. Now." He fumbled at the lanyard around his neck with shaking hands and held it out. She didn't even take it. She just nodded toward Ray. "Mr. Anderson is suspended, effective immediately, pending a full review," Catherine announced, loud enough for the whole lobby. "He is to be escorted out of the building. He does not come back in without my say-so." Ray stepped forward. For the first time all morning, he stood tall. "This way, sir," Ray said quietly. And wasn't that something? The same young guard Derek had threatened, had called nothing, had ordered to break the rules, was now the one walking him to the door. Not roughly, not cruelly. Ray didn't have it in him to be cruel. He just did his job, with a quiet dignity Derek had never once shown him. Derek stopped at the glass doors. He turned back, one last time. "Mr. Coleman," he said, his voice small, "I really am sorry." Jeremiah looked at him for a long moment. "I believe that you're sorry right now," he said. "The question is whether you'll still mean it tomorrow, when the fear wears off. That part's up to you." And then the doors opened, and Derek stepped out into the bright morning, no longer the star of anything. The crowd didn't cheer. It wasn't that kind of moment. People just stood there, quiet, sick with the weight of what they'd watched and what they hadn't done. Catherine turned to face them all, the investors, the staff, the dozens who'd stood by. "Every one of you saw this," she said. Her voice wasn't loud anymore. It didn't need to be. "You saw a man treated like garbage, and you waited until you found out he was important before any of it mattered to you." A few people looked at the floor. "Remember that feeling," she said. "Hold on to it." Then she turned back to Jeremiah, and her whole manner softened. She put a gentle hand on his arm. "Are you really all right?" she asked, just for him. Jeremiah looked down at the photograph in his hand. The young man, the warehouse, the dream he'd built from nothing. "I've been treated like that my whole life," he said quietly. "Long before this company, long before any of these walls." He looked up, and there was something steady in his eyes. But today, a whole lobby full of people finally saw it happen. That's new. He gave a small, tired smile. Maybe that's where it starts to change. You might think the story ended there, at the door, with Derek walking out. But it didn't. Because what happened in that lobby was never really about one bad morning. It was about everything that had led up to it. That afternoon, Catherine opened a formal review, And the moment she did, the floodgates broke. It turned out Derek Anderson had a history, a long one. Human Resources pulled his file and found something ugly. Complaints. Quiet ones. The kind that get filed and then buried because the person complaining doesn't have the power to push. A delivery driver who'd been called a slur and told to use the back entrance. A young woman in accounting, passed over for promotion 3 times while less qualified men sailed by. A janitor before Jeremiah, gone within a month of Derek's arrival, who'd told a friend on his way out that he couldn't take the way that man looked at him. It was a pattern, plain as day, once someone finally bothered to look. And now, people felt safe enough to talk. One by one, they came forward. The delivery driver, the woman from accounting, 2 interns, a receptionist who'd cried in her car more than once. They sat across from the review board and told their stories, and the stories all rhymed. Then there was the video. Hannah Wilson, the young analyst who'd stood trembling by the elevators, came to Catherine the next morning. Her hands were shaking, but her voice wasn't. "I recorded it," she said. "The whole thing. I didn't do anything to stop it, and I'll regret that forever. But I caught it, if that helps." It helped. The footage was clear. The shove, the thrown photograph, the threats. Derek's own voice, sharp and cruel, calling an old man filth in a crowded lobby. There was no spinning it, no misunderstanding. It was all right there, in his own words. Word spread the way these things do now. Someone leaked a few seconds of the clip. By that evening, it was everywhere. It didn't stop at the company walls either. The unlawful search, the threats, the shove, those weren't just rude. They were grounds for real legal action. The employees Derek had targeted over the years got lawyers. A civil claim came together fast, built on the footage and the buried complaints. Derek's name landed on a court filing, the kind that follows a person for the rest of their life. He tried to fight it at first. He hired someone. He talked about being taken out of context. But there is no context that makes "your filth that cleans filth" sound better. The video said what it said. Within weeks, the case was settled. Derek signed. He admitted to the conduct in writing because the alternative was a courtroom and a jury who had already seen the clip 1,000,000 times. The world didn't forget him either. His name was tied to that video now, permanently. Companies don't hire the man from the Janitor clip. Doors that used to open for him stayed shut. The status he'd cared about more than anything, the thing he'd humiliated an old man to protect, was the very thing he lost completely. He did it all to himself, every bit of it. The headlines wrote themselves. Manager humiliates company's own founder. Janitor turns out to be the boss. People watched it millions of times. They were furious, and they were right to be. But here's where this story turns, and turns hard. Because a lot of people in Jeremiah's position would have wanted blood. A lawsuit, a public destruction, a pound of flesh for every cruel word. Jeremiah didn't want that. He sat down with Catherine and the board, that old photograph still in his coat pocket, and he said something that surprised them all. "Firing one man feels good," he said, "but it doesn't fix anything. There'll be another Derek next year, and the year after, as long as the building lets it happen." So instead of revenge, he asked for change. Derek was terminated for cause. That part was simple. Threatening an employee, an unlawful search, putting his hands on a man, a documented pattern of discrimination. He lost his job, his references, and any defense he might have had. The people he'd harmed were offered settlements and, more importantly, an apology in writing, signed by the company. But Jeremiah didn't stop there. He used the moment to build something. A binding dignity policy written into every contract, top to bottom. A real reporting system, anonymous, with teeth, so the next quiet complaint wouldn't get buried. Mandatory reviews for every manager, so no one could hide a pattern again. And one more thing. The thing that meant the most to him. He created a fund, a scholarship for the children of the company's custodial and service staff, the cleaners, the guards, the people who came in before dawn and left after dark, the ones nobody ever looked at twice. He didn't put his own name on it. He named it after the job. The First Shift Fund, because that's where he'd started, with a mop and a dream, and he'd never once been ashamed of it. The company held a town hall a week later. Not a polished, scripted thing, a real one. Catherine stood up first and did something companies almost never do. She apologized, out loud, on the record. "We failed him," she said, "and we failed everyone he reminded us of. People we walked past every single day." Then she opened the floor, and one by one, the people who'd been hurt got to speak, in their own words, to a room that finally had to listen. It was hard to watch. It was supposed to be. At the staff meeting where he announced it, Jeremiah stood at the front of a packed room. No suit. He wore the same simple work clothes he always wore. "I built this company to be a place where people are treated right," he said. "Somewhere along the way we forgot that. Not all of us, but enough of us to let a thing like this happen." He looked around the room, at every face. "So we're going to remember, starting now." The room rose to its feet, and this time, the applause wasn't for the founder, it was for the janitor. A few weeks later, the lobby looked the same as it always had. The marble still shone. The morning light still slid across the floor in that long golden stripe. The plants by the elevators still stood tall and green. And at 6:40 in the morning, before the suits arrived, the old man was still there. Jeremiah Coleman pushed his cart through the side door, same as ever. The wheel let out its familiar squeak. He could have stopped, of course. He owned the place. He could have spent his mornings anywhere in the world, but this was where he wanted to be, among the quiet, among the people who came in before dawn. The difference now was small, but you could feel it. People said good morning to him, really said it. They looked him in the eye. The interns waved. The guards smiled. Rosa stopped to show him a video of her little girl, walking now, wobbling across a kitchen floor. The dignity had always been there. The man had always been worth seeing. The only thing that changed was that, finally, people learned how to look. And that's the part worth sitting with. Because here's the truth. The story you just heard is fiction. Jeremiah isn't real. Derek isn't real. That lobby was built out of words. But the feeling underneath it? That's as real as it gets. The humiliation of being judged the second you walk in. The assumption that you must have done something wrong. The crowd that watches and stays silent and only finds its conscience once it turns out you mattered all along. Those things happen. Not in stories, in real life. In real lobbies, real offices, real traffic stops, real shops. To real people who never get a CEO to walk through the door and set the record straight. Most of them don't get a 001 badge. Most of them don't get an ending where the powerful man kneels and the truth comes out. They just get the bad morning, and then they have to go home and carry it. So the real question this story leaves behind isn't whether this kind of thing happens. It does. The real question is what we do when we're standing in that lobby. Are we the crowd, eyes down, suddenly fascinated by our phones? Or are we the one person brave enough to say, that's enough? Because nobody in that story needed to know Jeremiah was the founder to know he was a human being. The shameful part was never that they got it wrong. It was that they waited for permission to care. The good news is, that part's a choice. And it's a choice we get to make every single day. Jeremiah learned a long time ago that you can't always control how the world treats you, but you can control whether you become the kind of person who looks away or the kind who looks closer. He chose to keep his cart. He chose to keep showing up before dawn. He chose to build something better instead of burning something down. That's strength. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need an audience. So now it's your turn to weigh in. If you'd been standing in that lobby that morning, watching it all happen, be honest with yourself. Would you have spoken up? Or would you have looked away like everyone else? There's no wrong answer, but there's an honest one. And the comments are the place for it. Tell the story down below. Maybe you've been Jeremiah. Maybe you've been the one in the crowd who stayed quiet, and it still bothers you. Either way, someone needs to hear it. If this story moved you, give it a like. It genuinely helps more people find it. Share it with someone who needs the reminder that how we treat the people who can do nothing for us is the truest measure of who we are. And if you want more stories like this one, stories where the quiet people finally get seen and the truth finally comes out, hit that subscribe button and stick around. Because the world has more than enough people willing to look away. It could always use a few more willing to look closer. So, which one are you going to be?